Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Hail Yes, the Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan football and basketball beat writer for the Free Press. I'm joined by Reiner Sabin, our Big Ten insider / transfer portal aficionado. That's why you took this job, right, Reiner?
Exactly. I love the transfer portal. Can't stop looking at it, thinking about it, imbibing it.
You probably see the database in your nightmares and in your dreams and your sleep. So that is the direction of where we're headed. But a little bit of housekeeping to get to before that. And first things first, we cannot function without our editor and producer, Andrew Burkle. He's down in Florida. I feel like I say that a lot. Andrew is insert blank location. Exotic location, and now it's Florida. Before it's California.
Since we started this podcast, it was California once and Florida one other time. So all that really says is I'll work from anywhere. I'll tune in from anywhere here.
Hey, that's a great positive spin zone.
I want to live Andrew's life.
Right? Well, why am I always podcasting from my basement? And Andrew is in. Where are you? Where in Florida?
I'm on vacation. I'm working from vacation right now. So
no, but what city? Are you
tuned in? St. Pete Beach.
Oh yeah, that's rough.
Nice.
Yeah. Just slaving away on the old microphone here, but no, we do appreciate Andrew's time. There's been a lot of moving around behind the scenes in the Free Press sports department, and who knows where we'd be without Andrew? Really, without any one piece. We need everyone who's making it going right now. And before we get into the crux of our show, which, in case the lead didn't give it away, is the transfer portal and whatever is happening with this sport that was college football. I just want to do, like I said, a little bit of housekeeping. First, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening. Andrew hit us with some numbers pre-show, and we're really starting to see some consistency the past couple months, which is awesome. And it's my job to try and remind people to do things that take like 2 seconds and are totally free, like typing words into your screen that are nice things about Andrew or Reiner, right? So do that if you can. And also, with that being said, it's now May 1st, which is our sort of dead time of the year, May, June, early July. I will say finally, because it has been quite the 23-24 season. I mean, things you just could not have imagined ahead of time. Maybe that's one thing we do. Maybe we put a bow, right? And we look back on this academic year, not today, but we're talking about, as Reiner, as pre-show, we were talking about, as we sort of transition into this quiet time, we want to make sure that we are doing shows a little bit, but we're not just going to be recording just for the sake of recording. We like to think we're informing people and have real reasons to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's going to be important to kind of obviously keep abreast of what's going on in such a fluid environment. And, obviously there'll be some movement in that period, probably more from a high school recruiting standpoint, but still even the portal will, with additions over time. And you never know when the roster could be amended during that period.
It's funny. It's like the seventh wonder of the world, where everything somehow leads back to this stupid transfer portal. Andrew, before we really get going, did I miss anything? Is that good?
I think it's a pretty good wrap up there. I mean, obviously, like we said, we want to make our episodes still feel important. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what we're trying to find the balance there. There's still plenty to talk about here in the next probably week or two here. But then, I mean, college sports is not like the NBA. There is the offseason is not free agency and trades and, salary cap situations like maybe in the MLB or the NBA with the Pistons. So, yeah, a little bit more of a slow time here. So we want to make sure things still feel important on our end. Is kind of like what we're heads at least.
Right. But luckily, we are not in the slow time yet. We are entering it. But the madness just wrapped up yesterday with the transfer portal. That is a pretty crazy thing, huh? So I'm going to turn it over really to Reiner with a little bit of an open-ended question, because I see things, right, at covering Michigan exclusively. I see things through the Michigan football lens. And of course, that's what this podcast is about. And we will look at things through that lens. But Reiner covers Michigan and Michigan State for us, and is pretty attuned to the rest of the Big Ten. I mean, he's got Mike Loxley on speed dial, is talking to James Franklin every other week, and PJ Fleck is his boy. I mean, it's just he's got the whole league on lock. I don't know about the West Coast yet. He'll probably have to add those to the Rolodex. But Reiner, I mean, I know you are. I mean, I can joke about this transfer portal stuff, right? A little bit, because Michigan, yeah, there was some movement, but it kind of looked like it has the last few years, right? Like a little bit of movement and how it is. I mean, Michigan State and really the sport at large, this thing just exploded. It feels like we've completely lost cabin pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think the sport really is at reaching critical mass as far as kind of a crisis situation, I think, as far as these programs and the sustainability of them going forward. And, a lot of it has to do with all this stuff coming all at once. I mean, you had the NIL in 2021 on the heels of the transfer portal, but then you had the passage of basically the one-time free transfer rule. And now that's even been amended to the fact that you can transfer as many times as you want after, there were some challenges in court cases that the NCAA basically was put in a very defensive position where they can't really enforce any kind of regulations regarding NIL and also the amount of transfers that you have. So basically, it's been a free-for-all. This was the first test case, the spring portal, really, to see how it would happen. And it hasn't been as extreme as some people predicted, but it's still been pretty substantial depending on what program you follow. And, for Michigan State, it's really been rough. They've lost a bunch of starters, a bunch of key players that would have been helpful for Jonathan Smith, where he's transitioning. And even Michigan got hit a little bit. I mean, from the lower end, maybe younger, depth pieces that would eventually mature into potential starters. I mean, that affects, a place like Michigan, because Michigan has built itself on being a developmental program. I don't know if you can have a developmental program in this day and age, because people are not going to wait around and see if they, to get a starting job. They're just going to go chase that possibly by going into the portal, or, they might be attracted by, again, a cash grab, that's presented to them. And so it's like, what do you do here? I mean, and so I think, coaches like Jonathan Smith at Michigan State, and even Sharon Moore at Michigan, who I assume is probably going to want to continue the developmental model that Jim Harbaugh instituted. It's going to be difficult to do that in this age where, again, anybody can leave at any time.
Yeah, and does it seem sort of, at least right now, like there's at least a correlation, if not a causation, between the stability of your program, right, and the amount of transfer portal guys who are leaving, or just the recent success. I mean, it's not just apples to apples, but I mean, yes, Michigan will be hurt, I think, in the long run by this, and I want to get into sort of like maybe that ripple effect in just a minute here. But in the here and now for this season, Michigan, it seemed, maybe put their eggs in the priority basket of don't let anyone come near our blue chip guys, right? Like, you're not touching, like, you might pick off Samaj Bridgman, and like maybe they aren't liking where they're stacking up in the pecking order, and we can't give the same love and attention to everyone throughout the roster as much as they say they try to in the meritocracy and the whole thing. But they kept their guys intact. Like, I mean, Michigan State might have thought they were out of the water until yesterday. And then you got the Mangum brothers, right? Both entering earlier in the week, both starting. Is it both starting D tackles? Owens and
Harmon and Barrow.
Harmon and Barrow. Yeah.
And then you have
that's an old name.
And then Gino Vandermark, who is also a very coveted offensive lineman, and they have issues with depth on offensive line. Yeah, I mean, they had some substantial losses. Michigan, I mean, they lost DJ Waller, which, you know, he was competing for one of the starting cornerback jobs. And then Keon Sabb, which actually has a huge effect because of what happened to Rod Moore. Yeah. I mean, so there were a couple of, but I mean, they didn't lose any of the core four, you know, that we all know about: Colston Loveland, you know, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, and Will Johnson. And so, I mean, they clearly prioritized that.
You could argue they didn't lose any starters. I mean, TJ Waller probably would have been a starter, right? But like,
Saab would have probably been in that mix too. I mean, with Makari Page, depending on how they wanted to play, you know, the nickel. Yeah, I mean, he would have been possibly competing himself. So that wasn't necessarily for sure, which is, I think, probably what influenced his transfer in the first place. But they didn't have the major losses now. But again, they still were somewhat affected by it. And but at the end of the day, I would say that they left this period pretty unscathed.
I would as well. And so I guess what's next, right? Because now that was sort of the survive period of the transfer portal, right? Because now guys can't put their names in. Now it is guys, you are in the portal, and you can always go back to the school you came from, or you can choose wherever that may be. So I guess obviously for Michigan's context, I saw they offered another defensive lineman earlier today from Grand Valley, right? Like they offered one from Kent State a couple weeks ago, one from Grand Valley. So that seems to be, I mean, an area of emphasis. And we got to think wide receiver as well. What else do you expect Michigan's transfer portal to look like this next few weeks, month?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to try to acquire, obviously, a wide receiver, and then, you know, maybe an additional defensive back, linebacker too. I would think that would be something that they would consider. Just, you know, maybe some depth pieces. I guess they were looking at the defensive line just because of, you know, obviously.
I mean, just that rally group.
They used a big rotation last year, and they were probably just like extra pieces on that end. But yeah, I mean, the problem with Michigan, though, I mean, and this is what it's going to be like going forward, is whether they can get any of these guys into the actual school, you know, to play for them, and they have to be a little bit more choosy. I mean, again, I talked to somebody who, you know, used to work in the program, and he thinks that they're kind of in a tough situation going forward because, again, they relied heavily on grad students for their transfer portal acquisitions in the past, and that might not be available to them anymore because people are not going to get to the grad level. They're not going to graduate. And so I think that that's a problem in this age of the portal, because if you're switching schools all the time, you're falling behind academically, and you might not ever get to that point where you're a grad student. So, I mean, yeah, so I think that there's going to be some limitations from their standpoint.
I think that makes a lot of sense as far as Michigan's concerned. But what do you think, big picture, about the transfer portal, Reiner, and where this is at?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, you had the story about them possibly reaching a settlement in that House versus NCAA case, where revenue sharing will be mixed in. I mean, you're already seeing that. I mean, Texas A&M's preparing for that possibility. They let go some of their athletic department employees, basically preparing for the idea that they're going to have to set aside $20 million for their student athletes. My question is, like, where does this go for college sports in general? Because your lower revenue, your non-revenue sports, or your sports that are just not that make very minimal revenue, could be negatively impacted if again, it's looked at as a pure business standpoint, and football and to a lesser extent basketball are the only ones that are actually generating revenue. Like, the money is not infinite in this situation. It's finite. And so they're going to have to figure out how they're going to do all this and work in a model potentially with employment. And then you have, again, all these other aspects where certain states don't allow unions. I mean, again, and so state or, organizations. And so a lot of public universities are obviously tied to the state. So, I mean, all of them are. And so that they're in. And so you have all these different rules and regulations that you're going to have to work around. I mean, it's a huge mess. I don't see where this thing goes. I don't see a logical solution to any of it. Honestly, again, I've argued with the employment model that people are not thinking about it. They're thinking about it purely in the idea of college, context, when really, like, what would prevent somebody, my age, your age, playing college football in an employment model? There would be nothing to say that, because, I mean, you're not applying, you don't have eligibility in an employment model. I mean, it's like, I'm able to hire if I can do the job. And so,
well, I think maybe you just have to write in an age limit, right? Maybe you would get.
But that could be argued in a court of law. I mean, you're going to have age restrictions to play. You have a cap on what age you can play college football. I mean, or whatever it's not even college football. It'd be, normal minor league football at that point, because and so I think that there's a lot of things that need to be sorted out there that wouldn't make a lot of sense. It feels like real world model to the college thing. That's the problem with all of this, is that everybody is trying to apply a real world model to college athletics when it's actually its own little kind of universe. And the whole model was based on, like, hey, you get a scholarship. We're giving you a scholarship because you're good at football and you're going to play for the university. So that was like the deal. And now it's like this other aspect of it. And then so the highest paid state employee is going to be your freshman quarterback, who's a 5-star. I mean, that's going to look really weird. I mean, like when the quarterback is making more than the Secretary of State in Michigan. Yeah. Or whatever, or the head coach, and so, I mean, the head coach is subsidized by private money, which is why usually Harbaugh was like making $500,000, but all of his money was coming from the bonus structure. Exactly, the bonus structure, and so, but I mean, again, it's going to look really weird when, again, your 18 to 20-year-old is making more than one of your major government officials.
Well, I mean, it's not, I don't think, what anybody wants, but I mean, like you're alluding to, it feels like, I mean, we're getting closer and closer to, I mean, God, I don't even like to say the words, but like you said, college football, like it just being football that's like affiliated through a university, right? Like it just...
Or it could go back to a D3 model where basically, there is no scholarship, and it's people that are actually part of the student body that are playing, that go to these places. I mean, it may have to go back to that, because otherwise it's not really college football at that point. I mean, you're not part of the fabric of the university necessarily.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I know. Which would be the worst possible thing that could happen.
Right.
I mean, that's the allure of college football. That's what makes college football, right? It's not that that it's higher level than the NFL. It's the idea that you walk the halls, the corridors, the diag, the campus, the community with one another, right? Like you are in class. Like I remember being in school and having athlete, right? Like you have athletes in your class and you see them, not just whatever is happening now.
Well, right, and it's just the problem is that I think people have lost the plot here, and that's the problem. I mean, like again, a lot of the people benefited from the previous system. Maybe there were 5 to 10% that were getting kind of not their just value. But a lot of them are extracting more value probably from it than anything, because I mean they're getting a free education and a chance at a degree that they probably would not have had the opportunity to, and a lot of first generation people as far as going into college got opportunities that were afforded to playing sports. And so some of those opportunities may go by the wayside if, we go to this model potentially, because there's just not going to be enough money to fund those other sports. So that's going to end up being a problem. And it also creates a problem for, again, the smaller G5 schools or even lower, like the FCS schools, because they're going to be like, well, why are we doing this? I mean, like, we can't really compete in this environment. It's too costly. And, they may just fold up shop, or go to
or break into levels, right? Like the Big Ten and the SEC is like some super league.
Right. And maybe some of those schools get left out because, somebody like Northwestern may be like, forget that. And, places like Vanderbilt or, Mississippi State or something like that, realizes that, like, it's just too costly to go, compete in this kind of environment.
Don't you think those institutions would be too hard? They couldn't just, Mississippi State couldn't just leave, like.
No,
I don't. Like they're stuck between a rock. They would be stuck between a rock and a hard place.
I think they would definitely try to make it work. But then you have the problem is you also have the Title IX component too, that was a good thing. It definitely boosted up women's sports. But then, the economics would dictate that you basically invest in the things that give you the most money, but Title IX mandates that you kind of have to have equal participation with women and men's sports, and so it's
fortunately women's basketball is surging now, right? And so maybe that's only 15 scholarships though, not
right, and that's also not everywhere either, and so it's like the top only a few programs where that's probably. The case where it is surging, and so do they lose out on opportunities? That would be a shame. And so, like, I think that the thing is that nobody thought about the consequences of what this would what the new model would bring. They just decide, like, oh, the players have to be paid, but at what cost? And so the other model made the most sense, honestly, because it just created a lot more order, and it didn't apply a real world model to something that you really couldn't apply a real world model to, because it was in and of itself its own thing. College sports, again, you got a scholarship because you were very gifted, from a sports standpoint. Same with academics. Like, there are students who were admitted on a full scholarship because they were really exceptionally academically, because the university wanted those people at their, believing that they're, eventually going to move on and, provide some major value to the rest of the world, and by extension, raise the reputation of the university. And so, like, that was the kind of the deal. And now it's just being kind of warped and everything else. And then the NIL component of it, that doesn't even represent, like, what it was intended to be, which was name, image, and likeness. But now it's just like, hey, you're good, and play for a football team, and we'll give you compensation.
And that is where we are going to take it right after this quick break, because, as you said, that's the other half of this Pandora's box. We'll get into that in 1 second. This is Hail Yes. Reiner, you talk about it. I guess I should say welcome back. Reiner, you talk about the NIL component of this, which is just yet another layer of, it sounded good, but isn't exactly what we had in mind, right? NIL, name, image, and likeness. Yep. The whole issue was that these amateurs, why can an 18, 19, 20-year-old not go be on a commercial and make money? Why can they not get a side job at Subway and make money, right? What have you? And why can they not have their name in a video game and profit off the fact that off of their name, their image, and their likeness? It's very cleverly named, right? But once that happened, which I think everybody is on board with the premise of what it was supposed to be, right? And if you're not, then I'm not sure why. But what has actually transpired is just kind of bribery, right? Right.
Yeah,
It is pay for play. It is, as the word Michigan uses, transactional. It is not developmental, where you stay in a program and you learn the ropes and you pay your dues and you rise the ranks and you go from water boy to reserve to starter to star. That is so few and far between now, and largely because of NIL. Because if you can't, I mean, it always seems the grass is always greener. The grass always appeared greener. And now when there is literal green on that green grass, you see for these 18, 19, 20-year-olds, it is just too tempting. It is too much to overcome. And we don't know what the final numbers will look like. But, Reiner, there will be thousands of players left in the transfer portal, just floating with no team next year, right? And part of it is, I mean, I don't mean to be like, I want the best things. I hope everyone does for every human, right? I hope it works out. I hope everyone could be a professional. Everyone could, but that's not how it works, right? And so when that's not how it works, it's kind of like serves your, where I come from, there's a little bit of serves you right. If you better be careful what you wish for, not with this whole that we all, I mean, maybe for us too, right? It serves us right for dying for change in college football when maybe it was pretty good, right? Like, you don't know when the good days are over till they're gone. But also mostly for these players. All right. You want to go have your cake and eat it too. You want to just go, I mean, you're a starting safety for Michigan State, who's the worst defense in America, and you think you're too good for it and you're going to just go up and leave. All right. Good luck. We'll see how that works. I mean, hopefully for him, and I don't mean that. I don't know if it's Jaden or the other Mangum, right? It's one of the Mangums, whose name I'm forgetting. Jaron. Okay, thank you. But it's like, you better be careful, and so and that applies obviously with Michigan too.
Yeah, I agree, and again, there is a be careful what you wish for with the transfer portal, and I think again this is what motivated Nick Saban to get out of college football, and I if you read his listen to his comments, and having covered him for 3 years, I mean he's always, there's subtle messages in everything he's saying, but like you could tell that he didn't like it, that in some ways that his hand was forced. I don't think he wanted to retire right now, but he just thought it was a lost cause, and with the way it was going, because the way that he ran his program was that, like, again, stick with me. I mean, if I feel like you're good enough, just stick with me and you'll get to a starting role, and then you'll have your shot at the NFL. But so many people were not willing to do that. I mean, there was guys that, like, back in the day that were like, again, really, really, really good players that had to wait their turn at Alabama, like Reuben Foster and Derrick Henry to some extent, and like they had to wait their turn, and then eventually they became superstars. But like a lot of the players were, they were so good coming out of high school that they would have been attractive to other programs in the NIL environment. Willing to chase the bag to kind of, go elsewhere. And so you have that problem. And then you're also dealing with the lack of control there from the coach's standpoint, where, again, you don't know whether the guy is going to be there or not. And so, I mean, from everybody's standpoint, I think there's a lot of frustration just talking to other coaches from other programs about, like, whether they have depth pieces going forward, come out of the spring, or whether those guys are going to be gone. And then also, again, also basically shielding players during the spring games from being seen. And like, you have to do that. And it just, all of it's just kind of crazy at the moment. And I think, there's a reason why some of these older coaches have just decided to give up on it.
All right. And the question for our purposes, right, to bring it back to Michigan is, what does this look like in the future? Like, this is the new environment, right? We don't know what the future is going to look like, but how can Michigan, when it does not want to be transactional, continue to survive when it is a transactional society and just sports, right? Like that is just the nature of the beast these days. And Michigan survived. They survived another round, right? Because this is what this year it felt like. The last couple years, it was all an era, right? It was building to something, and so that one was a little easier to keep together. Now, with the whole staff, it really put to the test Michigan's culture, right? How strong can you really keep it within those walls? And it survived in large part this first round. But you talk about, Ryan, let's get into a little bit why the slow level of the domino effect, right? And that depth and just sort of little pieces and little hits in depth, right? Like Samaj Bridgman, for example, right? Maybe he only plays a little bit this year, but next year, if either Ernest Hausman or Jayshon Barham were to leave, right, he would have been in the system for 2 years.
Yeah, or Jeremiah Beasley, who didn't even play a single snap for Michigan. I mean, jumped in the portal after signing with Michigan in December.
If I may, I just a quick Jeremiah Beasley story, just wild, right? I was at the Blue Lap. It's a establishment in South University Ann Arbor because Will Johnson and Samaj Morgan were hosting like a charity giveaway. It was right after Blake Corum did his, and all of these are local guys, right? Like Will Johnson, Grosse Pointe South, Samaj Morgan, West Bloomfield, and then Jeremiah Beasley, Belleville. And I was talking to Jeremiah. He enrolled early. He was starting the practice with the team. He traveled to the Rose Bowl, to the national championship, and was talking about these have been my boys. They've all been buddies. Like they're in 3 different years, but he's known Will and Samaj since they were all kids. And he's like, just seeing how they each immediately succeeded, even here, right? It just gives me that feeling I can do it. Not even a snap, not even one snap. I mean. Spring ball, right? And this, again, not a knock on Jeremiah Beasley individually, just a comment on where we're at. I mean, those conversations were 3 months apart.
Well, yeah, and to his defense, I mean, obviously you have the coach transition. I mean, you have a completely new defensive staff. I mean, it's not the same people who recruited you, and so. There is
that linebacker room. The turnover in that linebacker room has been unbelievable.
Yeah,
I mean, from Hilo to Partridge to Minter to Jean Marie, you got Barrett and Colson leaving. You got Beasley leaving. You got Bridgman leaving. I mean, that's like 8-9 faces.
Yeah,
18 months.
It's been a lot, but again. What I think, I mean, it does hurt Michigan. Again, they've been a developmental program. So, I mean, guys, it took 3-4 years for them to really hit their stride sometimes. I mean, like Michael Barrett is a good example. I mean, he was not probably his first 3 years was not really much of a factor. It probably took until year 4, year 5 to really be a strong contributor, and then like year 6, obviously he was extremely good, but that's a rare example of a guy who benefited from the COVID year. And then, same with Mike Sainristil. I mean, Mike Sainristil is not much of a factor as a receiver. Year 4, he goes to defensive back and then, again, starts making some huge contributions. So, Kalel Mullins, I mean, again, another player that might be a huge factor this year, but I mean, it's year 5 for him. I mean, and so Michigan's been a developmental program. That's what Harbaugh wanted. It's the only way that they really could, compete against, the Alabamas and the Ohio States and the Georgias of the world. And in the transfer portal model, and the way, guys can just dip in the portal, especially if they're not getting first team reps, it's going to be a problem for them going forward, I have a feeling. And I think, that's something to really, bear in mind as you watch Michigan going forward. Also, again, Michigan is not going to benefit from the COVID year. I mean, the COVID year really did of all the programs that were going to benefit most from the COVID year, Michigan was one of them, because the difference between Michigan and Ohio State's got a bunch of players, and this is why Harbaugh at one point initially proposed a rule, an idea to basically anybody can leave for the draft early. Well, Ohio State was that program. They've got guys that are only going to stay 2-3 years. Michigan's got guys that are going to stay the full duration of their college thing and then go pro. And so who is going to most stand to benefit from an extra year of eligibility? Well, it's going to be the programs like Michigan, who develop players and, guys that are going to hit their stride in their 4th, 5th, 6th year. And so in that sense, I mean, Michigan's not going to have that benefit going forward. I mean, the COVID year was a huge benefit to Michigan and part of the reason why they won the national championship.
I mean, and that very well, I think, not very well might be true. I also believe that to be true. However, do you see, I mean, I don't know if we need to get into the conversation of like, where does Michigan resettle, right? Because this 3-year run was, I mean, in many ways that it was a historic 3-year run, but that's not what Michigan has ever been, right? Like they'd won 12 wins games once before, and then they had 13, 12, and 15 wins, And so it's not like, let's say this year they go 9-3 and win a bowl game, 10-3 or 9-2 or 9, like somewhere there, 9-10 wins ish. That's not like, I don't know how much that is like, see, like, like they can't keep up. They can't do it. Like, because that's kind of what they've always been. That's just a very, very, very good regional program, but not the number 1, 2, 3 teams in the nation, like 8 to 12, sort of.
No, I mean, historically, that's good. Right. Like you said, they've been mostly in that kind of, 9 to 10 win range.
And so do you see this affecting that? That's the question I want to get to, because just because Michigan doesn't win another national championship, right? I don't know that means, see, like they were destroyed. It ruined that. Like, you know what I mean?
No, I mean, I don't know if that's the case. I mean, there's obviously more of an opportunity even, maybe compete for a championship depending on how things shake out with the playoff. I mean, obviously, with the expansion to 12 teams, more opportunity to get there. Of course, I mean, the Big Ten's harder than it was in recent years, plus with no divisions, getting to the championship game, not as easy, especially if you're in the West division. But I mean, but now you're competing against, the 4 programs that were added to it. Well, especially at the top 3. I mean, with Oregon, USC, and Washington, are really going to make it a little bit difficult, to navigate that schedule. So you better have some guys that you can rely on a year-to-year basis, and it's just it's going to become harder. I mean, I think Oregon's probably more set up to compete in this new age than, say, Michigan is, just the way that they operate and the NIL financing and everything else, and just what the whole program kind of represents anyway. And so, I mean, if Michigan wants to sell the transformational versus transactional thing, I don't know if that approach is going to resonate. And it's interesting, as the players cycle in who only know the NIL era, it's also going to be interesting to see how Michigan maintains that culture. I've actually asked some of the players that were leaving, at the Michigan Pro Day about that, and some of them said that they hope that the culture is going to be there, but they need that for them they understood that developing through the program, staying there was probably the right course of action, but they know that the younger generation may not see it that way because all they've seen is the NIL. So I mean, there's even a gap between the people who started college before NIL was a thing versus the people that again entered the university after NIL had already begun. And so I mean, you're already seeing somewhat of a divide between how players react to this.
Yeah, and there's no saying yet, right? There's no crystal ball to see or say exactly how it will pan out. But Michigan feels, at least from, people who I've spoken with, right? Michigan's not getting blindsided by what's happening. Everybody sees the tracks that these trains are on, and Michigan is trying to put its infrastructure in place, right? From what I'm told, with all the different layers and levels, there is just going to be even more of an emphasis. If you got tired of the phrase like Michigan man before, get ready for it to be doubled down on in this new era, right? That is what they will be saying they're looking for, right? Like, they're not moving off of this. They're not, unless there's big changes. You know what I mean? Like, unless a lot changes, this is the direction of the department. This is the belief of the department and Tyrone and Dusty. And you see, even let's take it even over to basketball, right? Look at the way Dusty May is building this program right now. Yes, right now it is all through the portal. He had to just build a whole roster. You can't only get freshmen, and there's very few left. But ton of freshmen, sophomores, some grad guys, but just this balance across. You can see that this is not just going to be this year. Like, it's going to be pretty competitive this year, but half this team at plus should return next year, which should always be the case, right? But it's just, you got to find, there has to be that crisscross, right? That overlap. It can't all be portal. It has to be what Michigan has, what the line they just threaded these past few years, right? Where the portal guys put them over the top, and it is plug and play. It is, you supplement through the portal. You don't build through the portal. And yes, that's going to be harder and harder to make happen. But I think Michigan's got, that's where their bread is buttered. That is their identity. And I think it's really important, you can adapt. It's important to be adaptable and not just rigid and stuck in your ways. I'm not saying that, but you got to have your identity. That's very important. And I think we've used this example before. Michigan State football and Mel Tucker talk about losing your identity, right? Michigan State, like blue collar, like operate under the radar and just kind of come up and bite you. And like, where did they come from? That's where Michigan State thrives. Not Lambos at midfield and photo shoots and glitz and glam and going all over the country. And Michigan's the same way. They cannot abandon what has worked, I feel.
No, I agree. I think their identity. I would say with Dusty May, again, outside of Roddy Gale, and I guess Sam Walters, they weren't really poaching guys, though, from, other major Power 5 programs. It was like
Trey Donaldson's from Auburn.
Auburn, yeah, okay, that too. But again, a lot of the guys were, from
Yale, North Texas, yeah,
exactly, yes. And so, that's something they had to do, and it's hard to get in those battles between the Power 5 thing, and that's also on a much smaller scale than, say, football, where if you're hemorrhaging guys and you have to go acquire them, is that even possible? And that's the thing. Like, that's why I think Sharon Moore and Michigan has made such a big effort to retain players, because acquiring players is very tough in this environment, especially if you're Michigan, and some of the credit transfer rule that they have to overcome. So in a large way, they're doing this out of survival, really, because retention is probably the best strategy, the most practical strategy for them going forward.
Yeah. And like we said, it's going to be quieter these next couple months, but it won't feel that way for this Michigan football staff, I'm sure, right? Like, it's just a different type of busy. They got to add some depth in the portal, and they got to get the 2025 class rounded into shape. I don't have it up in front of me. I think there's just a handful of guys, right? Four guys. Four, I believe, ranked 35th in the nation. They just got, it was a big recruit, big edge rusher from Chicago, right? A couple weeks ago. But Michigan, you want to see that number in the double digits before the end of June. Am I right?
Yeah, no.
At least they got to go on a run here.
They also need to acquire some, sign or not, get guys to commit that are
got to pay. I got to throw the bag at them.
Well, no, I mean, they got to get guys to commit, though, at positions of need, not just – I mean, edge has not been a position of need for them for a while. I mean, they routinely get good guys at that position. But I'd like to see them get some commitments at receiver. You know, I mean, it wouldn't be bad if they got another quarterback, maybe. I mean, the Carter Smith kid that they have currently committed. You know, it seems solid, but not like an elite level player necessarily. And so that would be something. And then also, you know, again, maybe somebody at a, you know, inside linebacker too, to kind of round out the depth there. I mean, I think, you know, there's some positions that they just seem to recruit extremely well at, obviously tight end, offensive line, and, you know, edge rusher. You know, but trying to get the elite guys at those other positions is the question with Michigan.
Yeah. And Carter Smith, 4-star quarterback, solid prospect, but not coming in with quite the J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Davis pedigree, right?
Right.
And so just a tick below that, at least on paper, right? Or what, for whatever that's worth. But yeah, no, Michigan's gotta get after it, and I think that'll do it. We should be back next week with plenty to talk about. That will be a full episode, and then we may end up doing. I don't know if I want to make any promises. We were talking about a mailbag, but if you're with us still, then you're curious about even what we're throwing around, even what we're floating around. So maybe mailbag and those sorts of things. But until then, I think we're done. Reiner, do you have any final thoughts, any point you need to hammer home before we let the people get on their way?
No, I mean, I feel like we covered it. I'm glad that we survived the spring portal window, I suppose. I mean, still feeling the effects of it, though.
I was going to say only by definition, only in body, not in spirit. But no, it was great. Good stuff. Andrew, hope your Wi-Fi is all set down there in sunny Florida.
Yeah, I realized I was connected to the wrong room. That's why I kept getting kicked out. Now my Wi-Fi is like perfect, should be great to go, and we're wrapping up. So
I love it. Andrew is now talking about his mansion room. It's not. No. He needs multiple routers in different rooms. You guys got it. I've seen an Andrew Burkle hotel room. Let me tell you, these are the places to be. So enjoy, my friend. And thanks everyone for listening. Once more, please rate, review, subscribe. Thanks to our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery-Nichols, our executive editor, Anjanette Delgado, sports editor, Kirkland Crawford, and audio engineer, Robin Chan. For Andrew and Reiner, I'm Tony. This is Hail Yes. Catch you next time.